very, very proud of this. Got COVID in Byron Bay. How fitting is that? Everywhere you go, you don't need vaccines. You just need to have more Luxes that are mixed with tacos, man. I'm trying to think of some. I'm not going to be on my A game today, okay? And I think you know why. COVID's pretty heavy. I didn't realize it was bad. First off, obviously, like everybody else, thought it was a conspiracy and didn't exist. Absolutely, definitely. Uh, Wuhan lab leak. What other conspiracy theories can I rattle out? Etc. Etc. I don't even know any of the science. It was just my experience with COVID is probably the same as yours. Is this your experience with COVID? Unless you are somebody who works at Coles, then you definitely did get COVID. But if you just frequent Coles, it's fuck, I forgot to bring a mask. No one's stopping me. That was mostly what it was. Unless you've actually felt it. But yeah, to anyone who hasn't had COVID, let me tell you what it's like. Think of the worst flu you ever had and then magnify it by 100. Well, at least it was for me. There was a point where I was thinking, I'm gonna die. Is that you, Dad? And then I realised that I was just watching Jumoan because that's all that my brain could handle at the time. He does look oddly like that. That is a very small in-joke that I don't think landed with you specifically, and if it did, hey, Uncle Fester, like, it'd be really small. But, yeah, look, it was bad, to say the least. You can't concentrate. For 3 days, my only thought was, my head hurts. I mean, it did hurt. So I'm glad that my brain was functioning at that level. But the slow, gradual process back to being fully conscious has actually made me think about consciousness. And it reminded me of a few points about it that does actually blow your mind. It will freak you out. It'll cause your eyes to do that cartoon thing where they pop out of their head and then they tie around each other and then they go, and that's what you'll look like for the rest of your life. You'll have to get plastic surgery after watching this. You'll be one of those freaks that they put out on Hello Magazine of, isn't she so pretty and brave? Right? That's going to be you. So keep listening. Consciousness, the best way that it was likened to me once, I remember one talker talking about it, that they were walking past a homeless person and they'd just come out of a seminar about consciousness, and the guy was going, spare dollar, I got spare dollar, to everybody that walked past. His realization was, when people were saying, why don't you get a job, you bum? You know when people always say, oh, well, it's just hard, they can't get a job because there are no jobs. It's worse than that. When you're at that level, when you are that alcohol-y, that your body is more or less just a bottle of gin. They should just put a tap on your side and yeah, it's prohibition days. When you're that low in consciousness, where do you go? Because you don't really have the mental acumen to build yourself out of it. That's what's happening on his level. And I think it's easy to observe when you're talking about somebody that is that down in the dumps, literally. Yeah? When you are that down in the dumps, it is impossible for you to gain the momentum to build your life from there. Even if somebody, I swear, I've seen this happen before, and it is the same thing that happens with really rich people that inherit their wealth, and then in a few years they piss it all away, and they become drug addicts. And that's all that they spend their money on, is drugs, prostitutes, traveling the world, frivolous shit, just whatever is in their whim. But I would argue that the reason that they are doing that is because they are set in that consciousness. That's what happens when you become a drug addict. It just puts you on a, very hippie terms, like a low plane, man. And that low plane, it's really hard to move out of. It's really hard to shift the gear out of. Here's the trippy part, though. Speaking of drugs, usually used to whatever your consciousness level is, and that is how your life is going to be determined. And what I'm talking about when I say consciousness, I guess another word is awareness. The simple awareness of, if I do this, X happens. If I do that, X happens. Whatever level you are at your life, that's probably more or less where you're going to be stuck at for the rest of it. It takes a long time. This is the really difficult thing about it, right? It's very easy to go down one level of consciousness. It's very hard to trudge your way back up. What I like about being sick is that you get to experience those levels of consciousness, I suppose. The ones from my head hurts to, and this was hilarious, this is the next one. You ready for this? Tell me if you got COVID, if you had this same experience. I swear, I can't be the only one. I've been going through Stan, because it's the only one that I've got, because I've got a friend's account, and all of the movies look like shit. The only one that appeals to me is Horrible Bosses. I think because the font is big and easy to read. So I whacked that on. I've never seen it before. I'm sorry to reference everything to Simpsons, but everything is just The Simpsons. I whack it on, and remember that thing on The Simpsons of Homer's really sick as well, and he says, he's got that really grey face from eating the Subway sandwich, and then there's something about, I don't know, watching an opera or something, and then he's like, sounds great. Oh my God, you're delirious. That's what happened when I was watching Horrible Bosses. I was sitting there naked in the bath because that's all I could do. I just sat in a bath for 3 days. Made that crusty sound a lot as well. I thought that was a joke, but that does happen when you are that sick. You make this sound a lot. And I was watching it, thought it was amazing, whacked on the second one, and then passed out because it had the same level of sleep as a koala. Probably asleep 20 hours a day. Wake back up, and I remember thinking while I was going to sleep, that was the greatest comic of his time. That small, annoying man in the back whose only joke is that he has a very shrill voice, but it doesn't have that funny tone to it that Chris Tucker does. Greatest comedian of our time. And the rest of it, I was just like, this is amazing. They want to fuck Jennifer Aniston, but he doesn't want to fuck Jennifer Aniston. Oh my God, that's fucking so good. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, what the hell was I thinking? It is the same experience that you get when you're drunk. You know, and you think that you're being an absolute champ and you're cracking all these funny gags, and then you wake up the next day and you realize it comes back to you that everyone has these disgusted faces at you of that was the experience I had with Horrible Bosses. And then after that, it just became this slow parade of watching a bunch of Stan films that got a little harder to comprehend, and at which point you realise that, damn, most Hollywood is just crap. Like, there is so many bad films that are produced. Challenge me this. You're watching Stan? Are you watching Stan or not? Not watching your husband who's called Stan. Some woman at the back being like, yes, I am. Tight cheeks. No, talking about the surface, obviously. Have you ever watched Stan and looked through the repertoire and thought, yeah, now, the only problem with my life is I don't have enough years to go through this incredible catalogue of art. No, most of the time you sit there and you think, fuck, there's a Rambo 7, you know? That's it. So, what was happening, and then, you know, you could comprehend something that's a little harder to understand, right? And then I just got back to it, and now I'm at the point where I can understand Friendly Geordie's videos again. But, and also, can't read yet, can't do it. Every time I just, my head hurts, and then I stop. But, that's what I'm saying, yeah? It is actually, this is where you should know. I think this is a really, really good indicator of how conscious you are. How long are you able to read a non-fiction book? How long are you able to read a non-fiction book and be attentive? The other one, obviously, is, are you able to sit there and just be amused by nothing? I think that that's actually something that's really a good state of, like, how conscious you are. But I think that that was a good one. That's the real indicator, because right now, I still can't do it. But daily, usually as a practice, minimum an hour. But I remember when I started out reading books, it took a while for me to get into that habit. Have you noticed? I noticed that this happens with people. People that start reading non-fiction books, they start falling asleep while they're reading it. Their brain just can't comprehend it. That's what I'm talking about. When it comes to consciousness, and this is the other thing, right? Like, look, I'm not saying that I'm the most enlightened being imaginable, but to constantly run your own business, to be faced with working those 20-hour days, you have to be fairly conscious. You have to be fairly aware of what is happening around you. But look, nowhere near a Buddhist monk or anything. I'm just saying that I am a little higher up than the average horrible boss's fan. Yeah? But that's the whole thing. It's just like you realize that this is like the one realization that I had after being sick, and this is something that you should probably pay attention to the next time you're sick, is, okay, so in my day-to-day life, I am at a level. So somebody who is just watching all your Marvel videos and all that stuff might be just down there, but like, even if you aren't, even if you're crushing it a little more in life than that person, you're up there. And then the next person who's crushing it in life is just boom. Yeah? That's what I'm talking about. It's actually one of those moments where you realize, because what I'm fascinated by when it comes to the mind is there's all these prisms in it of the filtration of the culture you grew up in, the filtration of what the press is telling you, the filtration of what your family told you. There's all of these prisms in it that create a mental prison. And I think that just the bare thing of how much are you able to pay attention to what is happening around you is one of those. It's one of those. I think that a big problem with, say, climate change or something like that is, I think most people just can't even handle, they're not even at the level of just, because why? Why do you need to understand all of the scientific mumbo-jumbo of it? I think it is even just the emotional level of not being able to handle something that isn't dumb, easy, like, here you go, I made gingerbread. They don't have that. They can't go any further than that. Just the emotional level of it is just too much for them, and then they start, shutting down as a result. I think that is tied into consciousness. So it's all just about how much you are able to deal with reality. If you were to break down what consciousness is, that's what I'm saying here, right? How much are you able to deal with reality? What a basic metric for any form of improvement in life. Any form of improvement. Whatever you deem as success, how are you going to measure it if you aren't accurately measuring it? If you're not capable of accurately measuring it? This is what scares me a lot about going back to, say, like a high school reunion or something like that, is that you realize that, okay, most people just kind of stay where they are. This includes myself as well. I think that I've improved a little bit as a result of reading 300 self-help books, but I think that it's not anywhere near what I would hope it would have been, but that's just the way that life is, I suppose. Yeah? So I think that that's it. It's just like, okay, a good indicator of, are you raising your consciousness? It's such a hippie state. Okay, let's just talk about that. Like, are you able to interpret reality correctly? I think that a lot of people just kind of stay where they are. Stay where they are their whole life. They're kind of just born at about that level of watching your 7 Gems every Saturday and eating dinner with the 6 o'clock news, and then they stay there for the rest of their life. They don't go up or down. There's no challenge there, I suppose. But the thing is that even if you are able to accept the challenge in the first place, you have to be able to deal with real life, to be able to process real life. That's what we're going to do here on Jordan Shanks. So, you should sign up to my Patreon, because I do have videos specifically dealing with that on the Self-Help Patreon page, which is just the basic exercises of what wakes you up. The first indicator, obviously, look, these are the stock standard. You have to be doing these, otherwise you're cheating yourself. Obviously, you have to be meditating. That's the first one in. Everything just gets more mellow. Like, you are able to absorb more of what happens if you just meditate. Minimum 10 minutes a day. You can find 10 minutes to do it. Even if you can't, this is the same thing, right? Because a lot of people just go, this is boring, and then they move out. Okay, start with just a minute. Start with a minute and move your way up, just like with reading books. But the reading, the gym, and the meditation, these are real basic things of, just allowing your body to even be present. Not that I can really talk about presence. I'm one of the least present people you'll ever meet in your life. But the processing data kind of just expands as a result of doing those things. So sign up to Jordan Shanks. It'll cost you less than a cup of coffee, and you know what I will give you in return? Increased bandwidth in consciousness. Coffee's not going to do that. I know that people are saying, I just can't cope if I don't have my coffee in the morning. What if you got past needing to have the coffee in the morning? What if it was just a treat that you treated yourself with? What if that was the case? Imagine how much money you'd save then. Then you could definitely go up to the next level of Jordan Shanks. Make sure that you sign up there. And thank you so much for watching this. Make sure you like and subscribe.